here. Welcome to the Tech York event. It's our first event of this autumn, and it's probably our 14, 15 event in general. So I'm very happy and I'm very honored to have you all here. For everyone who's here first time, Tech York is a community here in York for people who work in tech and creative to meet each other, to network with each other. Originally, our idea was to also maybe 51% of kind of business connections, maybe some sort of business collaboration, and 49% of just fun. I don't know how it goes actually. If anyone has any clients from anyone, let me know. I know we have a few very nice connections where there were some investment into new startups that happened several times, which I'm very happy and very proud of. But if you had any clients, let me know. So I'm Sergey Tsimbol, I'm from Ukraine, and I'm co-founder of Tech York together with Ben Porter over here. So we started it back in October 2022. For some of you who are here a long time, Tech York has been before with different founders. Now it's the third generation of it. We are co-founders of it. And Ben here, he is also a founder of York Creatives. It's a very amazing community that's over a decade right now here in York. And he is also running Node, and he is also running a collective co-working, which is fully booked now. If you didn't rent your space, you missed out. Yeah, and you can also buy, he's a very talented photographer, and you can buy beautiful book, like a photo book of York from Ben, if you want to talk to this guy. And me, myself, I am right now, actually, I started a new gig, so now I call myself, I'm a founder and CEO of Boost Workforce. It's a platform for subscriptions on product design service and product engineering talent. And I'm building it as much as I can. And today, we will have a very, very interesting topic. And the way we'll structure the evening is that we'll have our keynote speech, then we'll have a small break. After a small break, we'll have a fireside chat with your questions. So if you have any questions, please prepare them. You will be able to ask the speaker after a short break. And then all the breaks and everything, all the time we have, except for the speeches, it's for networking. So please meet each other, talk to each other, tell them what you do, ask them what they do, etc. So I'm very, very, very curious and very interested about the topic we are going to hear today, because this is the topic that every person that ever builds something asks themselves or asks people around them, because this is a very foundational things. You before you write one line of code, you gotta figure out consciously, sometimes unfortunately subconsciously, what type of the architecture will you have inside your product. And I'm very honored and proud to invite here Doug Winter, founder and CTO of Isotoma, to talk about the art and science of great product architecture. Doug, please.
So a few years ago, these guys approached us because they had an idea for a product. It just happens to be quite a lot. They were German, mid-50s, I guess, kind of my age. And they'd done that thing that many people do when they get that old, where they kind of discover the gym. And you must have known, you're all younger than me, but you hit your 40s and suddenly you start kind of feeling old. And you find the gym, and they got really into exercise. And they'd kind of made a lot of money. They were kind of in the middle stand, right? So they were kind of engineers. And as you do, if you're that kind of guy, they were like, learning how to lift weights, it's really hard. You have to get a personal trainer and all that stuff. Maybe we could build some tech. So I don't quite know exactly what their background was, but they decided that what they wanted to do was make some devices you strap to your body, and you hook it up to a laptop or a mobile phone, and it would measure your movements, and then you'd be able to see if you're, pumping iron correctly, or you'd be able to show people how to do the exercises properly. So they knew about the hardware, but they needed some software, which is why they were talking to us. Boom. ChatGPT made that for me. It's not bad, really. So we didn't bother drawing that. So they wanted to know how much would it cost to build this software, which is like the number one question I get asked as an architect is, How much will my thing cost? And to know that, I had to know what the requirements were, right? What does it need to do? But they weren't sure who their customer was. They had sort of two options here. One of them was, it could be somebody kind of like them. There we go. Here we are. Somebody kind of like them. Somebody with too much money who wants to go out and spend loads and loads of cash on some device to help them lift weights. Or it could be a personal trainer, right? Now, for a personal trainer, you'd have lots of devices, you'd be able to own a whole bunch to put all over someone's body. You could do some really accurate measurements. If it's for an individual, you're not going to bother, you don't want to buy 6 or 8 of these things. You've all paired Bluetooth devices before, right? Just imagine pairing 8 of these things with your phone and being confident they're going to work. It was kind of not going to work. So I asked them, who's your customer? Because it utterly determined the features of the software. If it's a personal trainer, what you're looking at is it's about managing a fleet, it's about customer retention, right? You use it as a sales device. You probably hook it to a laptop, maybe you have specialized hardware. You can imagine that's one sort of product. If you're selling it to an individual, you've got to talk to their phone, so it's got to work with an iPhone. You're much more concerned about videos of how to do a bench press, right? It's actually, although their core concept, as far as they were concerned, was the same thing, as far as I was concerned, it's an utterly different product, right? Completely different, which really frustrated them because they just wanted a price. And we went round and round in circles, and they never built it in the end, which was probably the correct decision, to be honest, because I don't think it was much of a market. So that's a pretty common, I really wish I could read what that said. So that's a pretty common problem at the early stage of a product business. And I talked to quite a lot of product businesses, startups, and they're all in that sort of space. They kind of know what they want, right? They come and talk to us because they want a price, typically. I need to put an architecture together to know what that is, and they don't really know what they want. So you have 2 problems in software. You want to build the right product, and you want to build the product right. It's quite neat, isn't it? And they're actually really different, but you sort of have to do them at the same time. And there's loads and loads and loads of work on this bit, building it right, yeah? There's ISO standards, and there's degrees, I give you chapter and verse on that stuff. But the top bit, which is actually far more important, gets kind of ignored as part of a software process, a software architecture exercise. But you have to do them both, and in my personal experience, if you build the right product badly, you are probably going to survive. If you build the wrong product really well, you've just wasted a lot of money. And actually people do that a lot. It's that the operation was successful, but the patient died, if you've heard that expression. That's where a lot of businesses go. So what does right product mean? There's lots of things that thank you, my graphic designer animated that, not me. There's lots of things that might go into what right product means. If you're involved in building something, you probably think about features. And that's typically when people come and talk to me, they've got their vision, like these guys with their Bluetooth stuff. They were like, I want videos of bench presses showing how your form was wrong, right? That was the picture in their head, okay? Because he'd been doing bench presses and was really pleased with his form, which is lovely, but it's not a business, right? That's just some tiny little thing. A successful product has far more to it than that. I'm much more concerned as an architect with lots of other stuff, right? And to pick one of them, capital expenditure. Very boring, absolutely crucial if you've got a startup. If I'm your CTO, then typically a software product, right? You spend loads of money up front building a thing, and that's where most of your cash goes. And then when you finally get it running, it all goes on sales and marketing, right? Bit of OpEx, Amazon bill, but it's mostly sales and marketing, right? But you don't make any money till you've launched, and I'm the guy who spends all your money, and that's your CapEx. So before you launch, you're there right now, Sergey, yeah? You've got to know how much you're going to spend, how much runway have I got? Because if I run out of cash before I launch, then I'm dead, right? So that's actually your number one most important thing. I don't care about your features, like your CapEx, your run rate, how long have you got, how many people do you need to hire, how are they going to work together, is actually far more important than any other stuff. And it's intimately linked to the architecture of the product that you build, because you have choices as an architect, right? You can build it quick and dirty, you can build the right thing first time. You've got choices. All the way through you have choices. How do you make the choices? Well, they depend on what you want to build and what the context is. So, why do I care about that? Well, as you've gathered, I do some architecture. So I'm CTO of an agency based here in York, and my role now is largely talking to people, really. I don't really write code anymore. I coach product teams, and I work with the senior people at customers and partners trying to make sure they don't make mistakes. I'm also CTO of a couple of SaaS businesses where typically I do technology strategy with the CEOs and those guys. And I work with engineering teams, and I sort of have this chief architect hat in both businesses where I try to enable other people to make the right decisions, if that makes sense, rather than do them myself. But I didn't start life as a CTO, obviously. That's me. I think you might just about know that's me. Proof I wasn't grey all my entire life. Those are my brothers. And, that's the ZX81, which I started writing code on in 1982, which is a very different experience from what we do now. If you could imagine at the age of 9 writing a program on that, it's kind of sounds like a very different thing, doesn't it? I graduated to one of these in 1987, Acorn Archimedes. Anybody ever touch one of these things? And you're all too young, and yes, excellent. So we got another one. Yeah, one in your museum. Lovely. That makes me feel really good. That had an ARM. That one probably. I think that had an ARM 3 in it. So it's the same sort of CPU you got in your phone, but a very long time ago. The BBC basically meant that they existed. So I wrote quite a lot of software for these things. Not that I finished much of it. And so, and some of you may have done the same, right? If you're a sort of hobbyist programmer, you follow that same arc from idea through to realization, but all in one head, right? So it's a sort of a similar thing, just at a different scale from how you might start a business these days with a whole bunch of people. And so, animation, I love it. So I've spent basically all my life in that bit there, like the stuff, in between an idea and a working product. Both like as a kid and now like running a few businesses. And people come to us because they know they need the stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of them, they've got this idea, they know they need a thing, they have really no idea what the stuff is. So lots of them think they've got like a business plan and this big box with the word code written on it. And all they need to do is fill the box with code, and when the box is full, like they're done, they've built the thing, right? And they also think the code is an asset, which is another conversation, because it really isn't. So what is that? What is the stuff that happens in between? If you're on your own, as I was as a kid, all the stuff happens in parallel. You don't have a process. You don't sit down and write a lot of JIRA tickets, you know. I mean, probably somebody does, but it's a pretty unusual approach if you're going to build a piece of software on your own, right? You kind of explore, really. you kind of have an idea, and you kind of do a bit of this, you do a bit of that, and you hold everything in your head at once. And you don't really need much structure to your decision making. And it works quite well. I mean, the productivity of a single person working on their own can be absolutely enormous if you can measure productivity, which is quite hard. But these days, we don't work on our own, typically. You work in groups. Some of them are insanely large, right? Hundreds of thousands of engineers trying to build something at somewhere like Facebook or Amazon or somewhere like that. And that's because they're part of a firm, part of a business, as probably all of us are in some way. Now, there's lots of theory written about why firms even exist. You might have heard of Ronald Coase, the economist, who had a really dominant theory about why firms exist. He decided it was to reduce transaction costs, which is a very economist kind of answer. He clearly never actually done any work. But for the purposes of most businesses these days, I think I've got some transitions. There we go. There's 3 reasons you would do stuff as a business rather than doing it on your own. And one of them is scale. You want to build something very big that you can't build on your own, so you need lots of people. One of them is repeatability. You want to do the same thing again and again and do it better each time you do it. And one of them is to enable specialization. It's really helpful to have someone who's a proper expert in something, but you don't have enough, the only way to do that is to be a big enough company you can fill a whole, people come in quantums of one, right? You have to hire individual people. So you need enough work to fill a whole person with work, right? And all of those things, there's a typical answer to how you do it in business, which is process. And all of us see it all of the time. Like if you work anywhere, you'll definitely have some process. I would have thought, certainly anywhere big, there's probably a massive manual you've never read that tells you how to do your job. Now, in 2024, this is what that looks like for software in lots of places. If you work somewhere moderately big, you probably see something like, this is Scrum, I just stole this off the internet, some flavor of Scrum. When I go and talk to bigger customers of ours, this is what their devs teams are doing, something like this, where you have sprints, and they have the Scrum, which is like their stand up in the morning, and they have a lot of meetings, and they spend a lot of their time talking about tickets. I have a friend who'd never worked in software. She works for ITV, and she was a TV producer, channel manager or something, moved into software, and she said to me, I can't believe it, they just have meetings talking about tickets. Like, that's all they do. I was like, yeah, that's how it works, that's how software works, right? She's like, what the fuck's a ticket? You really don't want to know. But anyway, that's the process. But it's all driven by this bit here, right? Which is called the backlog, if you're doing this sort of thing. And really the idea is that you're done, you've built your product when your backlog is kind of empty. You fill the backlog with your requirements, this is what we want. And it's a machine that spits out a product at the other end, which is lovely. So how do you fill your backlog, right? It's clearly kind of a crucial part of the entire exercise. Like all that other stuff, the scrums and tickets and shit, is kind of unimportant if your backlog is garbage. So how do you know what you're supposed to be making as a business? Where does it come from? Now, there's sort of a standard answer to this where you go and talk to your customers. Find your stakeholders, as an architect you would say, because it's not just your customers, it's your ops team and finance team, and kind of all of them are stakeholders in your thing, and you need to find out their requirements, right? So you go and have interviews with your stakeholders and ask them what they want. Now, I don't know, have any of you ever tried interviewing stakeholders about their requirements? Yeah? How did that go? Yeah, good. Was it valuable? Learn a lot, right? Nobody's got a fucking clue what they want, right? This guy, David Chapman, who I'll refer to a couple of times, this amazing quote, "Dark, unconscious Freudian desires for software." I absolutely love it, right? So they definitely want something, right? You talk to them and they want something, but they're unable to access what they want, right? It's like genuinely like a Freudian thing, right? Like, I don't really think they have unconscious Freudian desires for software, okay? But it's almost what it feels like. It's really frustrating. So, it's annoying when I got transitions on a slide, because all it shows on the next slide is it's just blank. Who knows what we've got? So, process is a rational exercise, right? You have a goal, you have a problem, and you try and solve it, right? That is what rational means. But to decide what you want isn't rational. There isn't a process that will tell you what you should be doing. And that applies to everything in your life, actually. You should choose your personal goals. You don't know where they come from. They just kind of come from somewhere, right? So there isn't a process that tells you what you should be building. Like, everybody wants such a thing to exist, right? And people keep trying to come up with one, but it's not a thing. It's just genuinely not a thing. And if you ever come across Fred Brooks, who wrote some essays like, they're about as old as I am, who said there is no silver bullet, this continues to apply. There just isn't. There isn't a magic process that will tell you what the hell you're supposed to do. There just is not, right? It is fundamentally not rational, right? But all of our sort of training is in being rational. Building the product right. You know, our processes and ISO standards and everything else. That is a concrete thing. You can state a problem, come up with a solution. You can sort of demonstrate there are better or worse ways of doing it, right? And rationalism as a technique pertains to that. But building the right product is not. It is, your requirements are nebulous. They aren't defined, right? And David Chapman has called this thing meta-rational. I was very glad to come across, because it was one of those things you're reading, oh yeah, I always thought that. I had no idea what it, I couldn't put a word on it. So he put the word on it, and I'd really like it. Because it's not irrational. It's not like you just go mad and pick something, but it also is not rational. There's some other process above and beyond being rational that allows you to select what you ought to build. And I think as professionals, we find this disturbing, because we're trained to be rational. If you go and do a degree in science or engineering or something, it's all about you're given problems and you solve them by applying rational techniques. And you never question the problem. You don't go like, am I working on the right problem? I mean, like you might do, like you might get 6 lectures on ethics, but like that's as far as they'll ever go on telling you to question the problem you're given, right? In the end, and I kind of buy into this, right? Like, I kind of don't care if I'm building bombs or saving whales. In the end, I love solving the problems, and it's sort of a get out for us in engineering. The customer comes, they say they want a thing, and you build a thing, and it sucks, and nobody wants it. And you go, oh, I should have asked you to build something else, which is lovely, but it's still kind of a failure, right? And so all of that training in rational thinking doesn't build the right thing. I don't know, it seems like a massive failure when you think about it like that. So finally, I'm going to come to architecture. It's a really misunderstood term. If you read books on architecture, of which I've read many over the last few years, all of them in the introductory chapter define what architecture is. And they all have different definitions, and I think all the definitions are rubbish, to be honest. Probably the best one I've seen is where they say things like architectural decisions are design decisions that are invariant, that you can't change. They're the ones that you get fired if you get wrong. You know, they're sort of just design, but really important design. Yeah, which sort of makes sense when you look at it you look into the past. You look at the design. You go, oh well, bad architecture. That's why I went wrong. Yeah, which I occasionally hear, but I actually think it's the design decisions that aren't rational. It's the ones you have to make when you haven't been given a problem yet, or where it's very nebulous, which is where I spend a lot of my time, where I have a customer turn up and they go, well, I had this idea, what do I do? I don't know. You know, you don't really know what you want, so we have to kind of work it out together. And that's what links all of these things together. And like I said, it's a random set of things. It depends on your business as to what the things are that might matter for you particularly. Oh, that was supposed to be a oh, there we go. There is a transition. And it's I'm going to call it architecture. You call it whatever you like, right? But in 2024, I think it's a reasonable word. And it's like typically my experience of this is there are several possible sort of solutions in this space, right? You could think of it almost like a quantum waveform collapsing or attractors in phase space or something where you get a solution that enables something to happen in these places. And you go, well, it might take a long time to build, but it'll be really valuable, or it's very quick to build and it's going to be cheap, or whatever, like where it kind of works. But this would be sort of niche. Well, you might remember this quote, Mark Andreessen in 2011, software's eating the world. It kind of got everywhere. So if software is eating the world, then software decisions, software architecture is going to eat business, right? All of those sorts of business decisions that used to be taken by business people, by accountants, become software architecture decisions, right? Things that you might typically think precede architecture become part of your architecture, like capital expenditure. Cost. The number one question my customers have is how much will a thing cost, right? But is it really a requirement? So normally what happens is you've got a requirement and you've got to build your solution to suit the requirement, right? But my experience is it is not a requirement. People say I want a thing, I come back and say it's £1 million. They go, bollocks, I don't have £1 million, right? They don't just say, oh, you failed, off you go, I'll ask somebody else. They go and find £1 million, right? Like, money is available, they want the thing. Actually, the thing is the requirement, the cost is available, the money is available, right? Clearly, I say £1 billion, they're not going to do it, but there's quite a big landing zone for cost that depends on the value of what's being produced, right? It's not a requirement. Actually, the architecture determines the cost, not the cost determining the architecture. There's like a circular dependency between the two. And it's not just like how much it costs, but also the structure of that cost. How much is upfront? How much is OPEX, CAPEX? How much do you start getting back once you start earning money? All of these things drive the structure of your business. How many rounds do you need of seed and VC? Do you want angel? Like all of that shit that you might think are business decisions. They're software architecture decisions in 2024, right? Which is kind of mad when you think about it. Like how many software architects are out there determining your VC? So what do you do about that if you've got a business? So you should pay attention to architecture as that incorporates those things. What am I doing? All right. You don't need to have an architect to do architecture. And typically I would say anyone who calls themselves an architect, you should run a mile because they're probably going to break everything. architecture is an emergent property that you get from a group of people working on a problem, right? But I think people often don't pay enough attention to it as a coherent vision that incorporates all of these things, right? Just pay attention to it, know that it's happening, right? Rather than sort of just being sad it's hard to make decisions, like accept that's part of the process. You need to accept that that process of creation is non-linear. You don't define your requirements, go and get an architecture, build it, get a solution, launch and go live. Like, that's not actually my experience of how any of this works. Well, when it works, like, that fails a lot. But actually, you go round and round and round over and over again until you're very bored. So don't get too invested in your decisions. All of your most important decisions are going to be based on vibe. And you're going to feel like you're failing because of that, because you haven't done it properly. You haven't done the science. And actually, you're doing it okay, right? Like, you've got a mature product and you want to decide, do I build this module or that one? Fine, go ask your customers. They can tell you, right? But early stage, it's all on vibe, right? You go out and do some sales, we talk to somebody and they say something, you go, shit, that's the right answer, let's go, yeah? And you just got to live with that. And this one is a bit weird, but I get people that come and talk to me and they've already decided what to tell me. They filter out all of the context, right? So for instance, things like, how are they planning to capitalize their business? They don't think that's important to me. And actually it's really important. I don't want to keep going on about money, but money is really important. And in fact, often they don't want to tell me because they think I'm going to fleece them if they say how much money they've got. It's like, how am I supposed to do my job if I don't know how much money you've got? Really frustrating. So context is crucial. Remember your decisions. God, the wrong order, that's annoying. So there are ways of doing this. The decisions you took at the time you took them are very, very important things. It's really easy to forget what you knew at the time. There's a technique called ADRs, architecture decision records, any decision records, some people call them. I highly recommend the technique. Just writing down what your options were, what you chose and why. Super valuable, because things move really, really quickly. And actually being able to go back over those decisions helps stop you just looping and looping and looping, right? Which is a really common thing. Those two slides are in the wrong order. So, Tyler Cowen. Have you heard of Tyler Cowen, economist? Really annoying bloke, no? He's really annoying because I disagree with him about everything, but he's very smart. And he came up with this quote, which I just think is absolutely, really, really clever. So when somebody comes up with something to tell you, by definition, the context is missing because they've chosen what to tell you, right? The context is the other stuff they've chosen not to tell you, right? And generally, it's actually the context I need to hear. So whenever somebody's telling you stuff, you need to say, why? What's the stuff? How did you choose those things? How did you feel when you chose it? Like, what's the vibe? Very difficult to get that out of people. Really, really hard. So if you are trying to hire an engineering team, like, give them all of that stuff too. Don't hide it from them and think they don't need to know it. Like, that's the stuff that will help them make the right decisions. And that's all I've got. Like, I know it's all a bit vague, but hopefully that helps.
Well, Doug, once again, thank you so much for the topic. And we had a quick chat after, and you kind of covered very painful topics, especially if anyone is in the agency business, you feel the pain. I will start with a very specific question, but I personally faced a lot of these questions before, and it is very related to kind of product architecture. So today's September 2024. If I come to you as a customer and I say, hey, Doc, you know what? I want to build a food delivery app in my country. We don't have that there yet. I have a 150K quit. What what should I do? How should I build it? On what technology stack? What kind of architecture? What would you suggest me?
So, I mean, it's funny really, because when you're an engineer, you kind of think those are the absolutely core questions. You think they're really, really important, right? But they kind of aren't in a way, right? Like actually in 2024, you've got a range of programming languages. They're all largely, for most things, they're largely equivalent. They all use the same libraries. Half of what you build just calls APIs in the cloud anyway. It all just runs in public cloud. It kind of doesn't matter, right? The reason you make the choices is not for any technical reasons, right? It's to do with availability of staff and their skill levels, whether there's very specific domain stuff, right? Like you're doing AI, you use Python or whatever. And the team, right? So you've come to us, I'll say, well, use the technologies that we use because then I can do it.
They're the
right?
best.
Like what? I mean, they're not the best, they're just the ones that we've learned, right? And I'm upfront about that. Like we had to learn something. So we chose a couple and I'm comfortable with our choices. But largely, those things don't matter. There are occasionally places where it really, really matters. You might have particular areas where performance is very important. But even then, it's unlikely to apply across your entire application. So you might decide, I'm going to do the whole thing in TypeScript, but I'll do a little bit in Rust or something because it needs to be really quick. You might decide your most important part of your product is your iPhone app. And you see this quite a lot. Some apps, they'll launch an iPhone first because particularly it's a US market. You want to capture a particular demographic. And in that case, you might just go iPhone native first, right? And that's not a strategic architectural decision, right? It's a tactical decision to hit your initial market where you need to get that mindshare, right? So just like I was saying about architectural choices, right? Like actually, what's the demographic you're hitting and what's the geography determines an engineering choice, right? It's not like there's like a universally correct, platonically right programming language, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much. This is how CEOs that are over 20 years of CEOs are thinking and telling it. And this is always fascinating for me to have these type of conversations because, I mean, yes, it's like, there are so many ways of building something and there is no one right answer usually. Sometimes there are.
It's rare though.
Yeah, and I feel stupid when there is a very right answer and the CTO knows and I don't. But anyhow, thank you very much. All right, the question from the audience. Who had the question now? All right, we start with John here.
What's in the company name?
So, my wife chose it. It's a type of flower, and we had one in our garden the day I founded the business, and the .com was available. And it started with I, and like tech businesses start with I. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very good story.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, if you're naming things is really, really hard, right? Like genuinely one of the most difficult things you do. And actually choosing something that doesn't mean anything is quite good because you can keep it, right? You choose something really meaningful and 5 years later it's wrong,
All right, perfect. That's a very nice story. And Gareth, right there.
So your business delivers value to your customers and that is your asset, right? How you do it, hamsters running in a wheel, anything, they don't care, right? Code is a nightmare, absolute nightmare, right? It's this big stack of thought stuff that barely functions at the best of times, right? Like it's balanced like this big teetering pile of garbage. It only works because you've got lots of people looking at it. It is a liability, right? Which everyone hates because you spend a load of money on it, right? But you didn't spend money on it because you wanted code, right? Like you don't actually want the code and it doesn't do anything else. And furthermore, like it's of no value without it supporting the structure, right? Like without the dev team who understand it, who can maintain it, who can change it, it's genuinely a liability. It costs money for it just to exist, which blows accountants' minds because you go and hire a dev team and build some stuff and you can bang it in your balance sheet like, quite easily. Just put it straight in your balance sheet as an asset. And it really isn't. The asset is what it does for you. And the less code, the better, really. If you could deliver the value with no code, bloody do that, right? Genuinely. Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, I've got a few. Founders particularly, and they have to be like this, have a vision of what their final goal is, right? And that's what they're working towards. But what they've done is they've gone from A to Z, You know what I mean? And they have to have done that because the other way is just too horrible. You're a founder, like just don't do it. It's awful, genuinely. like, you know, you'd be glad if it works, but God, it's brutal. So for instance, we had someone come to us and we tried to dig into actually what is your actual business problem at this precise moment, right? And actually his problem was he needed funding, right? He kept going on and on about the core functionality of his product. It's like, but you haven't got any money. So what's the point in building that? You haven't got any customers, you haven't got any money. You're going to build it, what are you going to do with it, right? There's nothing. Actually, what you need is a really good slide deck, right? Because you need to go and get some funding. Like, that's actually the product you need, right? And we can help you with your slide deck. And in fact, we ended up like charging him 15 grand or something to work with him on something that was really convincing. You know, we'd worked through the models and everything, right? But that was a difficult journey with him to convince him that what he needed was a deck because he just so wanted to build the thing. Right? And yeah, I mean, so it's easier now we're 20 years old, actually. People tend to just believe what we say, which is lovely. It saves a lot of grief. We have an AI project ongoing at the moment where they came to us and we said, actually, you're going to need to put down about 100 grand on a prototype that we'll throw away, right? Which is a really hard sell. To tell someone they're going to put down 100 grand and we go like, oh yeah, it might not work. Build a prototype, might suck. Sorry. But they went for it because we've been around a long time and we worked with them previously. And that was fantastic because it's a relatively new area. It was very directly applicable to their domain. Legal publishing there's not many places I would recommend you go and build a custom AI product in 2024, right? But actually, they had fantastic content, really well marked up, really well understood, that's like particularly relevant for AI because it's the legal domain. And because we were able to go and build the prototype, we were able to understand the problem, which is what they needed, right? They didn't need a solution; they actually needed to know the problem, which is quite a difficult place to be. They were just like, we have to have an AI thing because our investors will kill us if we don't. I'm like, well, let's find a problem that it's relevant to. That's actually what you need, right? No, they just don't want it. And actually, very large companies have worked this out, right? Try not to disappear into the weeds. But if you're a very big company, you end up with a process for how you even initiate a project, right? And it's based on your discount rate of capital and those sorts of things, right? And they know that you need to choose the right project because there's a million projects you might do. But they get sucked into the sales process of UX businesses. And what they end up doing is buying massive slide decks of UX, right? You see this all the time. They go, we need to work out the right problem. They end up with this massive slide deck. I don't really know what to do with it because that hasn't actually solved any of their problems. It looks lovely though. I mean, it's a beautiful product. But actually, often what they need is like a single A4 sheet of paper, actually, with a thesis that makes sense, but it might cost them 100 grand. And it doesn't feel like 100 grand's worth, but it genuinely is, right? Like all the very best ideas, when you've got them, you go, oh, that was really fucking simple. Can't believe it took me so long to get there. Yeah.
Perfect. Doug, question from me, and then we'll probably have another 2 or 3, not more than that. So every now and again, in the technology space, some new thing appear, and it helps us decrease the capex on building it like tenfold, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can do like stupid examples, probably not correct, but I would imagine like when we were moving from assembler to language like programming languages, and then like more stupid but recent things like with WordPress, it was way easier to start building those blog posts with Shopify e-commerce. So is there anything that you are looking at right now that may be this sort of kind of revolutionary technology?
That productivity, that's a really good question.
I just want insights, you know?
Yeah.
I just want to know what to sell to my clients.
Yeah. So, I mean, AI has the promise, right? Genuinely. So we've got in our business now, in Isotoma, probably about 25-30% of the code we produce is written by AI now, I would say. I haven't measured it, but that's what it feels like from talking to our devs. And that's using GitHub Copilot, which is integrated into VS Code. and there's some stuff it's really good at, and there's some stuff it's really bad at. But actually, so I do still write code. I'm not allowed anywhere near. My code never goes into production because it's awful. But I often do just stand little things up, right? And to be honest, these days AI writes all of my code for me because I can describe my problem very well, and then it just goes, bleh, and it nails it, absolutely nails it, brilliant, right? So it will take us as a profession a good decade, really, to digest even the capabilities of the current AI models. When you talk to people about their experience of AI, it's really uneven, right? Like some people absolutely hate it and think it's, in fact, they seem to be able to believe that it's both evil and awful and pointless all at once, which I don't quite understand. And at the other end, you have people who think it's both going to destroy the universe and it's amazing, which also is a bit weird, right? But you get lots of people in the middle with different experiences, and that's largely to do with them rather than it. Do you know what I mean? What's their personal exposure and experience to it? So I think as a profession, it's going to take us a long time to work out how to integrate it into what we do. That will probably, double, triple our productivity when we really figure out how to use it. Otherwise, actually, we're already at the point where we are spending most of our time, like I joked about developers spending all their time in meetings about tickets, right? But actually, that's because they're doing they're trying to work out what you want. They're trying to actually determine what the problem is, because the solutions these days are generally really quick. Once you've worked out the problem, it's often not very much code. Right, genuinely. There are spaces where that's not true, where you have to go and write 1 billion lines, but typically, for most systems, there's a library that does most of it. It's just understanding the problem is your real challenge, right? So it's not an engineering problem, right? It's not a technical problem that we're solving. It's a human, organizational, ideation problem.
So what I'm hearing from you is that potentially the biggest revolution like that might be in just better understanding between humans.
Yeah.
That will lead to that tenfold faster, tenfold
so
cheaper.
It was genuinely one of the things I've seen at last. So I've been doing this for 30 years now, which is a very long time. So in 1995, I talked to people who wanted to buy some software. One of the greatest challenges was that they had never used software, right? Like I was driving up and down the M1 trying to flog websites in 1995, and I'd go to a building society and they go, "What's a website?" Right? That's a really hard sell. Yeah. And they can't describe what they want. They've never used the thing, right? These days, just the fact that people and their intuitive understanding of what good software is has made a dramatic difference, right? People within. So when I work with large enterprises, there's a general understanding that a business change program is really an IT project with a few people tacked on. Right? It's all about the IT. They've seen successful projects. They understand how they work. We're able to communicate, and it's actually just you need everyone to sort of level up to understand how these things work, which just takes time. And actually, that's a large part of it, I think.
For sure. Thank you. The next question from the audience, please.
So I try. I mean, it's funny. So most of my career, I've built stuff for other people, and now I've got a number of businesses of my own. So I have experienced sort of both sides of this. So when my customers come to me with something, I try very hard not to care if it's the right product, right? We always say they're the ones who are mining for gold. And we build the shovels, we give them shovels, and they go and choose what to do. And if it succeeds, that's great. If it fails, I don't care. I still get paid, right? And it's actually really important to think like that, because it's up to them to make the choices. Maybe they're right. And pretty routinely, customers will come to me with a thing, and I'll go, "You are nuts. That's a really dumb idea." And the clever ones, the mature ones, will actually ask for my opinion. Hardly ever happens. Hardly ever get a founder who talks to me and goes, "And what do you think? Do you think I should do it?" So funny. I won't volunteer my opinion, right? Because that would be ridiculous. But if they ask me, I will give them an honest answer. They hardly ever ask. So weird. Actually, I just find that very strange. But anyway, we'll go and build them the thing, and they go and launch it. Nobody wants it, or whatever. It's a terrible idea. I don't know. You made your choices. And so for the customers, I will steer them as much as I can, but it's not up to me whether it's good or bad, right? It's up to them. We'll just do the best we can to solve their problem for them. For the businesses where I own parts of the business, where I'm the CTO, it's completely different. And you have to have this mindset where you suspend your belief. Like, you kind of have to believe lots of things simultaneously. Like, you have to believe it'll succeed or you wouldn't bother. But if you believe too hard, you're unable to change course, right? You sort of have to hold all the things in your head at once, right? But we have, both of our biggest startups, the ones that have got the furthest, the initial product was the wrong product. Like, absolutely was the wrong thing, right? Like, we had a vision, we built it, nobody wanted it, right? Like, it was, like, we were kind of close. It was sort of a thing. You talk to people and they go, oh, yeah, but they don't buy it, right? Because you've actually got to get it really good for somebody to part with money. And you have to be willing to be in there for the long haul. It's going to take twice as long as you think. It's going to cost twice as much. It's going to be really difficult. Sorry. Twice if you're lucky. Yeah. And you have to be the difficult thing is interpreting the feedback you get from the customers you talk to. Right, you go and talk to them, and they lie to you. Right, they don't they have dark Freudian unconscious desires for software. So they'll sort of tell you some stuff that maybe they want, and sometimes they're saying it to you just because they want you to go away, right? And they don't really know what they want. So you have to listen to it, interpret it, but not put too much weight on it, and you have to come up with your own coherent vision for something that will do what they want. And if you're lucky, you eventually get something that people choose to buy. And if one person will buy it, probably loads of people will, But that first one is really difficult.
If you go long enough, somebody will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, I think that was a very good last question to wrap up this fireside chat. Doug, thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. I enjoyed that. Thank you.